students every year going to teach in Great Hearts. I've had my first one come all the way to Arizona, whom I did not know was here till this morning. I visited a history class, and here was my student from Baylor holding forth. It was a great, therefore, night. But now the Great Hearts programs both in San Antonio and in Irving have become major centers for Baylor students to go and teach. They are largely products of our honors college. And so I urge you to talk with your graduates, and I know most of you are in the elementary program, but about coming to Baylor, where you can not only have a whole curriculum designed around various honors college topics, but you can major in the great texts. You can spend 4 years reading, studying the great texts. So a double kind of initiative I hope some of you will follow up on. I am not wedded to PowerPoint, so you're going to be glad that I will show you some images but not have, what do you call bullets? There are no bullets here. I don't have a formal lecture. I'm going to talk with you and not at you. George Will says that PowerPoint has killed public speaking in America. So instead, if power corrupts, PowerPoint corrupts absolutely. But I thought it might be good to show some images of Tolkien, because you can't often hook students if they can have some visual image of the thing or the person they're studying. So, a couple of questions. How many of you have read The Lord of the Rings? Nearly everyone. So I give you a wonderful line from W.H. Auden. It says, this world is made up of two kinds of people: those who have read The Lord of the Rings and those who will eventually read The Lord of the Rings. Those of you who have not yet have that great treat in store for you, and it's a very great treat indeed. But rather than talking about it this afternoon, I thought we'd do something more manageable, a little story called Leaf by Nibble. How many of you had a chance to read it? Well, I will have to go lightly since not all of you had a chance to read it. How many of you had a chance to read my introduction on Tolkien? There'll be no quiz at the end of this hour. Any of you have a chance to read the introduction? Well, I will talk a little bit more about Tolkien than I thought I would. And look at a poem that's very, very important for Tolkien. Tolkien is a truly remarkable figure. He doesn't fit in any category. In fact, of course, the Oxford Inklings, Tolkien, Lewis, Charles Williams, Owen Barfield, their thinker, whom you must get to know. He's the powerhouse mind behind the great Oxford Inklings. Dorothy Sayers on the sideline. Unfortunately, because she was a woman, she was not invited into the Inkling circle. It was an old boys club, to be honest about that. And part of the breakup of the Inklings came when Lewis not only married Joy Davidman, but insisted on bringing her into the Inkling circle. And the resentment wasn't simply because she was a woman, but because she could outthink any of the men there. That made her doubly resented. So don't think that that women get downplayed in my teaching or in the teaching of the Inklings. On the contrary. Just a quick sketch of his life, and we'll look at some pictures. You see his dates there are 1889 to 1971. He's there for 3 years, C.S. Lewis is senior, because Lewis is born in 1892. Tolkien actually grows up for his first 3 years. Please come in. Plenty of seats here. In South Africa, because his father, his mother, please, there's room. Because like many other Brits of that age, he'd gone there to make his fortune. And Tolkien spent his first 3 years in South Africa, but when his mother became pregnant with her second son, Hilary, she came back to England to deliver that child in safer circumstances. And alas, while she was back in England, he, her husband, Tolkien's father, came down with a serious illness and died in South Africa. So Tolkien never knew his father except, please come in. The vividest kind of memories. The only absolutely indelible thing that Tolkien took back from his 3 years in South Africa was his very unpleasant encounter with a large spider. Anyone identify where that spider occurs?
In the Hobbit.
Hey, I didn't answer. I'm one of those of whom my Lord speaks, because they have ears to hear and hear not. So you can raise your hand when you answer. Who will answer where the spider recurs? Yes, ma'am.
Well, in the forest, when they're in the Hobbit, the giants.
Not in the Hobbit, in the Lord of the Rings. Sorry.
Two Towers.
There's a spider in
What's her name?
My name is Jessica Johnson.
Yes. What's the spider's name?
Sheila.
Sheila. Yeah. And it was Tolkien's unpleasant encounter with that spider that came to be the kind of negative inspiration of Sheila. Mrs. Tolkien then is saddled with the task of raising 2 sons on her own. She, by this time, has become not a nominal C of E Christian, but a very devout Christian. And in England, at that time, in order to be seriously Christian in a way that didn't make your Christianity like wallpaper or background noise, the most drastic way was to become a Catholic. And so she became a Catholic. Whereupon she was disowned, largely. On the one hand, by her own Unitarian family, and even worse, by her husband's Baptist family. So when I, as a Baptist, visited Priscilla Tolkien, Tolkien's daughter, in Oxford, she said, "You know, my father wouldn't have very much use for you." I backed off at it. How's that? She said, "You're a Baptist." And she said that he inherited his mother's disdain for those people who had simply written her off because she had become a mackerel snapper, candlestick, you name it. And this was a sore point then for Tolkien, because his mother, in order to make sure her sons got the kind of serious Catholic education she wanted to give them, put them in the oratory school. They moved to Birmingham, a suburb called Sarehole Mill, and worked herself to death and died young of tuberculosis. And this meant that for Tolkien, his mother was a martyr. His mother died for her faith. That is to say, she was so devoted to her sons being brought up in the faith, she worked herself to death and died young. That means that then Tolkien and his brother Hilary, by the way, she was herself a master of languages in a way that once every educated person was. This is talk about the difference between our age and that one. She had fluent French and German, and taught her boys already to speak those languages early. So by the time Tolkien was 4, he was already speaking French. And so he becomes linguistically skilled right from the start. He would end by learning 14 languages, almost all of them dead. Usually he could learn a language a summer. That was typical of Tolkien. Most of them Northern, most of them Germanic, most of them Scandinavian, or in the case, one exceptional case, Finnish, which is not a Germanic language, but it's something kind of akin to the Slavic, and just a linguistic genius, no other word for it. So she puts them in the oratory school, those boys. She dies, but she's willed him to be under the care of Father Francis Xavier Morgan. You can't get much more Catholic than that, to have a priest named Francis Xavier, the founder, of course, of the Jesuits, and a good Welsh name like Morgan. And he rears those boys well. He makes sure they are attendance at the altar daily as altar boys. But by the time Tolkien gets to what we would call high school, he's so far advanced that no longer could the oratory school really challenge him. So he had the 2 brothers put in King Edward's School, which they of course call a private school. a public school, we call it a private school. And Tolkien, again, flowered and blossomed here. The curriculum was entirely Greek and Latin. For the senior class play, they put on a comedy in Greek. In Greek. Tolkien could write Latin fluently. And for the kind of graduation and prank, they sang the English national anthem, in this case, God Save the King, in Greek. So super smart, super devoted to languages, but no sissy. No, Tolkien was not the kind of aesthete fellow who just lived in his head. He was a first-rate soccer player. He played rugby. You've all seen the bumper sticker that reads, "Give blood, play rugby." He was a toughie. He was not at all lip-listed. But he also had the very great gift of friendship. So while he was there, and I notice this is one of your core values, core virtues, better put, he knew how to make friends. And so he made friends with 3 other young men who were all at King Edward School in Birmingham. And all 4 were drafted into World War I. Only Tolkien came out. And I quote a poignant passage, if you have my outline of his life, of this one dear friend and colleague writing his last letter to Tolkien, saying in effect, not all of us are going to get to live out our lives. Whichever one survives, if he survives at all, will have the chance of living out the lives we didn't get to live. And so Tolkien, in effect, pledged himself to do that when none of these dear friends came back. They called themselves the Tea Club Borovian Society because in England there were still tea clubs where you went to have tea. And tea, of course, does not mean a little cup of Lipton's. It means a 4 o'clock kind of prandial, an early kind of what we call snack. Which, by the way, when Priscilla Tolkien entertained me at her home in Oxford, I told her I would call, remember that's their phrase for visit. Very briefly, I would hold my visit to just a short time. I knew she would not want to be burdened with this Yank coming in and invading her territory. Turned out she had all kind of connections to Wake Forest, the school where I then taught. I wound up staying 3 hours, and then she served me tea, which meant cucumber sandwiches, scones. Do y'all know what scones is? They make biscuits look sick. They're really good, as we say in these sections, heavy with fat. And strawberries, and the British don't mince words, full fat cream. That's what they call it. None of this reduced fat stuff. And we feasted, had a wonderful visit. She looks like a hobbit. She's about 5. And she has a nice round paunch. They eat 6 times a day. No swim fast anywhere in Hobbiton. Lovely lady with whom I'm still in touch. She's in her 90s at Oxford. One of my students on a Fulbright at Oxford is in her very parish, her very same Catholic parish. So there's been a wonderful renewal. I visited with her in 1988. Over all these decades, I'm still in touch with Priscilla Tolkien. She said my father was absolutely devoted to my getting the same education my brothers did. I was not a mere girl who would get a second-rate education, while my brothers, there were 4 Tolkien children, 3 boys and this 1 girl. She became a social worker, a very successful woman, never married. So, Tolkien is one of those 4 boys, young men, 19, drafted into World War I, and only he comes back. He comes back only because he contracts trench fever. If you know anything about World War I, you know this awful existence. These soldiers lived in these trenches full of lice and fleas and all kind of vermin. And trench fever was not like a case of the flu. It was often deadly. You didn't survive it. So he was invalided out, as they say, brought back to Britain for recovery. And by the time he recovered, the war was over. But he fought at the Battle of the Somme, the most horrific battle of World War I. 420,000 men were lost in that one battle. It's been estimated that for every centimeter of ground gained, 2 men were lost. For every centimeter. So that Tolkien comes to anticipate what now we call Saint John Paul II was defined as the culture of death. The culture of mass murder in the 20th century. Roughly 80 million people killed by violent means in the 20th century, most of them by their own governments. And the statistic I use with my students, to the point of their anguish almost, more people were killed by violent means in the 20th century than in all preceding centuries combined. Now, partly, of course, because we have the means to do so, but we also had the will and the motive to do so. So the war was to leave on Tolkien an absolutely mesmerizing effect. Here's where the division starts to begin. So I'm what I call an equal opportunity offender. I have something to make everyone angry. C.S. Lewis was marked hardly at all by the war. Tolkien marked definitively by the war. His whole work is about the culture of death. If you read the preface to Screwtape Letters, which was written right on, as you know, the verge of World War II, Tolkien has Screwtape say, we don't expect to gain very much from this war. Well, for Tolkien, the war, World War I, was the demonic victory. Not only little was gained by the demonic, but horrifically great, horrible things were gained by the demonic. John Garth has written a very fine book on Tolkien called Tolkien and the Great War. That was, of course, the nickname, or the shortened name. This was to be the war to end all wars, you know about that. Where he points out that the scene called the Passage Through the Dead Marshes, anyone remember that passage in Book 2? Was inspired largely by Tolkien's attending an old boy reunion at King Edward's School. At the same time he was writing The Lord of the Rings. And he sees all these empty desks, empty chairs. It wasn't just his 3 friends who didn't come back. You know, England's best and brightest were wiped out by World War I. When you go to any Oxford college, the first thing you see is the list of war dead. Not World War II dead, World War I dead. In the scene of the dead marshes, Gollum is leading them across this very marshy kind of fen, as the British call it. And right beneath the surface are the heads and visages of the dead. When he went out over the top of the trench from which he would be fighting, he would be stepping on the faces of his own colleagues who lay there in the mud, frozen. And that all came flooding back to Tolkien, and that's what, quote, inspired the scene of the dead marshes. So for Tolkien, war is the uniquely modern horror. And for Tolkien, therefore, the uniquely modern temptation. Much can be said. I've written a book on Tolkien. But if I could summarize what I think the Lord of the Rings is really about. How can you defeat the enemy without adopting the enemy's means? That's the reason the one ruling all-powerful ring must be destroyed, because it is the very vehicle of the victory that Sauron would like to win. And for Tolkien, the moment we adopt the means of the enemy, we are the enemy. We become the enemy. Can you see the relevance of our time? I mean, this is springing everywhere. How can you defeat the enemy without adopting the enemy? How do you defeat evil without adopting, becoming evil? To be honest, for Tolkien, it means dying. Being willing to die. Tolkien's motto was, I fight the battle of the long defeat. It's a haunting phrase, the battle of the long defeat. By which he means, we're not going to win. We're going to lose. The question for Tolkien is how we're going to lose. Will we lose well or will we lose ill? What will be the means of our defeat? There's a luminous line from The Ball and the Cross by Chesterton. I've been advertising. This gentleman knows that book well. Any of you read that short line? The most, again, lapidary line from The Ball and the Cross is this one, where I think it's McKeon says, the cross is the one thing that cannot be defeated because it is defeat itself. So for Tolkien, evil will eventually undo itself. He holds to a thoroughly Augustinian doctrine of evil as privatio boni, the absence, privation, twisting, perversion of the good, and therefore it has no real being. It has only, in the deepest sense, non-being. Evil is no thing. It is nothing. But being nothing, it can assume any form. That's what makes it so horrible. But we cannot wait until evil undoes itself. Because in the process of undoing itself,